The reading of the will was quick and strangely uneventful. My cousins whispered eagerly, waiting to hear about land, jewelry, or cash. My grandfather, Charles Whitaker, had lived a long and complicated, quiet, stern, always carrying the weight of unspoken stories. When the lawyer finally reached my name, I braced myself out of disappointment. To my grandson, Daniel Whitaker, he read, "I leave the garage at 47 Alder Street." That was it. No explanation, no note. Just an address most people had forgotten existed. My cousins smirked. "Guess you got the short end of the stick," one of them muttered. I forced a laugh, but inside, something stirred. Why would my grandfather leave me that place of all things? The garage had always been whispered about in my family. My mother used to change the subject whenever it came up. Once, when I was a kid, I asked Grandpa about it. His face turned pale, and he muttered, "Some doors are meant to stay closed." After that, no one mentioned it again. But now, it was mine. The following Saturday, I drove out to Alder Street. The neighborhood had grown old and forgotten, much like the garage itself. Weeds crawled up the cracked driveway. The wooden siding peeled in long strips. The windows were coated in years of grime, impossible to see through. The heavy padlock on the front doors was rusted, but intact. I stood there for a long time, hands shoved in my jacket pockets, fighting the urge to turn back. Something about the place gave me chills. But curiosity won. The key the lawyer had given me was small, old-fashioned, almost delicate. I slipped it into the lock. With a groan, it turned, and the padlock snapped open. The heavy doors creaked as I pushed them apart. Dust billowing into the cold morning air. Inside, it was darker than I expected. The air smelled of rust, mildew, and something faintly metallic. My footsteps echoed against the concrete floor as I stepped inside. Shafts of light pushed through holes in the roof, illuminating broken tools, rusted car parts, and shelves lined with jars, whose contents had long since rotted. But there was more. In the far corner stood a tarp draped over something large and solid. My pulse quickened. I walked closer, the floorboards creaking beneath me. When I pulled the tarp back, I found an old car dust covered, its paint faded almost to gray. But it wasn't just a car, it was a 1967 Shelby Mustang. I froze, staring at it in disbelief. This car wasn't junk, it was worth a fortune. But as I circled it, one thing was clear. My grandfather hadn't left it for me to sell. The glove compartment was locked tight with a different keyhole, and the trunk had been welded shut. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide whatever was inside. That's when I noticed the second lock dot near the back wall of the garage. Half hidden behind a pile of rusted tires was a Its edges were sealed with heavy chains and a newer padlock, far less rusted than the one I had opened at the front dot. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a garage. It was a vault. A place where my grandfather had hidden something he hadn't trusted anyone else to find. I should have left. I should have locked the doors and walked away. But I couldn't, because at that moment I knew one thing for certain. My grandfather had left me a mystery, and if he went to such great lengths to keep it buried, then whatever was inside could change everything I thought I knew about him, and about my family. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the image of the chained trapdoor burned in my mind. I had inherited more than a garage. I had inherited a secret someone might be willing to do anything to protect. And the next time I went back, I wasn't sure I'd be alone. Sleep didn't come easy after that first visit. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that chained trapdoor, the heavy lock gleaming in the dim light. Why had my grandfather sealed it so carefully? What could he possibly have been hiding? By sunrise, I knew I couldn't stay away. I grabbed a flashlight, a crowbar, and an old pair of gloves and drove back to Alder Street. The garage looked even more unsettling in the morning light. The peeling paint seemed starker, the silence heavier. For a moment, I half expected someone else to be there waiting for me, maybe a relative, maybe a stranger. But the street was empty. Only the sound of my footsteps crunched against the gravel as I unlocked the doors again. Dust swirled in the air as I stepped inside. The Mustang sat in its corner like a silent guardian, but my eyes went straight to the back wall. The trapdoor. I knelt down and examined it more closely. The chains were thick and surprisingly new, the padlock shiny against the weathered wood. It wasn't something my grandfather had done years ago. It looked like it had been secured more recently, which meant someone had been here after him. That thought chilled me. Still, curiosity pushed me forward. I tried the crowbar, but the lock held firm. Frustrated, I sat back, brushing sweat from my forehead. My flashlight beam caught something etched faintly into the wooden boards, just above the trapdoor. Carved into the wood were 3 letters, DW. My initials. I froze. My hands trembled as I traced the grooves. My grandfather had marked this, not for anyone else, just for me. Whatever was beneath that door, he had wanted me to find it. A sudden noise jolted me upright. The sharp snap of gravel outside. I killed the flashlight and stood still, heart hammering in my chest. Someone was walking by the garage. Through a crack in the wall, I saw the blurred silhouette of a man moving slowly down the street. He paused in front of the driveway, his head turning toward the garage. I held my breath, afraid even the sound of my heartbeat would give me away. After what felt like forever, the figure moved on, disappearing into the distance. But the message was clear. I wasn't the only one interested in this place. Determined to find answers, I turned back to the lock. If I couldn't force it, I'd find another way. I searched the shelves, knocking over old jars and boxes, until I found a rusted toolbox. Inside was a set of bolt cutters, heavy but still sharp enough to work. My hands shook as I gripped the handles and positioned them over the chain. The metal groaned with resistance, but with a final squeeze, the chain snapped. The sound echoed through the garage like a gunshot. I froze again, waiting, listening, nothing, just silence. Swallowing hard, I pulled the lock free and lifted the trapdoor. A cold gust of air rose up from below, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something older, metallic. My flashlight cut into the darkness, revealing a narrow staircase leading underground. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But I couldn't. Not when my grandfather had gone to such lengths to hide this from the world. And not when he had carved my initials into the wood above it. Step by step, I descended. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. The concrete walls closed in around me as I reached the bottom. The basement was small, no more than a hidden bunker. But what I saw there made me stagger back in shock. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers labeled with dates that went back over 50 years. On a workbench sat old photographs, neatly stacked, and in the center of the room, under a dusty tarp, was something that looked like a metal box, heavy, locked, and marked with the same initials as the trapdoor. D.W. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just about my grandfather. Somehow, this had always been about me. And I hadn't even opened the box yet. The basement smelled of rust and secrets. My flashlight beam swept across the rows of filing cabinets, the stacks of dusty photographs, and that heavy metal box sitting in the center. My initials burned on its lid like a brandy. Why? Would my grandfather carve my name into something hidden underground, decades before I was even born? I approached the box, my palms sweating. The lock was old, but solid, impossible to break open without tools I didn't have. So instead, I turned to the filing cabinets. Maybe they held the key. The drawers groaned as I pulled them open. Each folder inside was carefully labeled with dates: 1962, 1968, 1974, year after year. Stretching into the 1990s, every file held the same type of material: newspaper clippings, photographs, and reports written in my grandfather's neat handwriting. I flipped through one marked 1974. The headline on the first newspaper clipping made my stomach twist. Local teen vanishes without a trace. The article detailed the disappearance of a 17-year-old boy named Michael Brooks. There were photos of the boy smiling, school pictures clipped to the folder, and notes in my grandfather's handwriting. Last seen near Older Street, possible connections, unanswered questions. I swallowed hard and pulled another file, This one from 1981. Woman missing after night shift car found abandoned. Again, photographs. A young woman in a waitress uniform. Notes scribbled in the margins. My grandfather had tracked her last known movements. The names of people she worked with. Even details the police had apparently overlooked. Folder after folder, the story repeated itself. Missing people. Unsolved cases. At first I thought maybe my grandfather had been obsessed with crime solving. Maybe he had been keeping track of cold cases, the way some people collect stamps or baseball cards. But the deeper I dug, the more unsettling it became, because mixed among the news articles and photos were scraps of information that weren't public. Handwritten notes that felt first-hand. Things like, car still at the corner. Witness, unreliable, evidence buried deep. My heart pounded. How had my grandfather known these details? I turned to the photographs on the workbench. They were black and white, most of them blurry, as though taken quickly or at a distance. People walking down streets, cars parked outside houses, a man looking over his shoulder. None of the subjects seemed to realize they were being watched. And then I found one that made my blood run cold. It was of my mother. Younger, maybe in her early 20s, she was walking out of a diner, looking tired but unaware. Scrawled on the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, were the words, "Keep her safe." My chest tightened. Safe from what? From who? The silence of the basement pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. I glanced back at the metal box. My initials stared up at me, daring me to open it. I dragged the box closer to the workbench, my arms straining under its weight. The lock rattled against the lid. I searched the drawers, the shelves, everywhere for a key, but there was none. Just more files, more photographs, more questions. Frustration surged through me. I slammed the flashlight down, and as it rolled across the table, the beam caught something etched into the concrete wall, a message. Faint, but unmistakable. It read, "Daniel, if you're reading this, they already know." My knees nearly gave out. Who were they? What did they already know? And how could my grandfather have predicted I'd ever be standing in this basement, decades after he sealed it shut? A sudden creak echoed from above. My head snapped upward. Someone was walking across the garage floor. My breath caught in my throat as dust sifted down from the ceiling. The footsteps were deliberate, slow. As though whoever it was knew I was down here. I switched off the flashlight, plunging the basement into darkness. My pulse thundered in my ears. And then, the trapdoor above began to move. The trapdoor creaked as it lifted, dust raining down onto my shoulders. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might echo in the silence. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath. A beam of light pierced the darkness. Someone had a flashlight. Boots thudded against the wooden steps as a shadow descended. "Who's down here?" a man's voice demanded. I clenched my fists, ready to fight or run. But instead of answering, I stayed frozen, my back pressed against the cold concrete. The beam of light swept across the cabinets, the workbench, and then landed directly on the metal box. The man swore under his breath. Not supposed to be open yet. He moved toward the box, fumbling at the lock. Completely unaware of me in the corner, I could see him better now, a man in his 40s. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running across his jaw. He didn't look like a random trespasser. He moved with purpose, as if he'd been here before. I shifted slightly, and the floor creaked. His flashlight swung toward me instantly. "There you are." His lips curled into a smile that sent ice down my spine. "You must be Daniel. How did he know my name?" I bolted. Shoving past him, I scrambled toward the stairs. He lunged, grabbing my arm, but I twisted free. Adrenaline fueling me. I dashed up the steps and slammed the trapdoor shut, throwing my weight onto it. The man pounded from below. "You don't understand what you're messing with, kid. He didn't want you down here." His words cut through me. He didn't want me down here. But my initials were carved into the wood, and the message on the wall. I didn't have time to think. I shoved the heavy toolbox onto the trapdoor as the man shoved from beneath. The chain I had cut earlier lay useless on the floor. A reminder that I had opened something that wasn't supposed to be opened. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911, but the screen flickered. No signal inside the garage. The pounding stopped. Silence. I backed toward the doors, my chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Just as I reached them, a voice floated up from below them now, almost taunting. You think your grandfather was a hero, Daniel? You think he was protecting you? Ask yourself this. Why did so many people go missing in this town? Why do you think he built that basement? My stomach turned. I yanked the garage doors open and ran into the daylight. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands trembled as I shoved the keys into the ignition and tore down Alder Street, my headlights cutting through the early evening shadows. Only when I was miles away did I pull over, chest heaving. I sat there, replaying his words again and again. Why do you think he built that basement? Had I got it all wrong? Was my grandfather not some kind of secret investigator, but something far darker? The files, the photos, the missing people, and then the note carved into the wall. Daniel, if you're reading this, they already know. Who were they? Was the man part of them? Or was he warning me about something worse? I couldn't go to the police yet. Not without proof, not with everything pointing back to my own family. For all I knew, they'd turn it against me. Instead, I drove home, locked my doors, and spread the photographs and documents I had taken from the basement across my kitchen table. My grandfather's handwriting stared back at me, meticulous, obsessive. Each name, each date, each note connected by invisible threads. And then, at the bottom of one folder, I found something that made my blood run cold. A photograph of a child. Me. 6 years old. Standing in my grandparents' backyard. On the back, in the same handwriting, were 4 words. He must not know. My throat tightened. Not know what? Before I could process it, headlights flared through my front window. A car had pulled up outside, and sitting in the driver's seat was the man from the basement. The headlights burned through my curtains, throwing long shadows across the living room. My heart pounded as I crouched low, peering through a sliver in the blinds. It was him. The man from the basement. He sat calmly behind the wheel of a black sedan, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on my house. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just watched. I backed away, clutching the photograph of myself. The words on the back echoed in my skull. He must not know. Not know what? I grabbed my phone again, praying for a signal. This time, the bars flickered to life. My thumb hovered over 911. But before I could dial, my phone buzzed. A new text. Unknown number. It read, "If you want answers, don't call them. Meet me at the garage. Midnight." My stomach nodded. This was insane. Going back, there was the last thing I wanted. But deep down, I knew it was the only way. I waited, pacing my living room, until the clock struck 11:30. The man never left his car. By midnight, I was back at Alder Street, the night thick with silence. The garage loomed against the moonlight. The doors were ajar, swaying gently, as though someone had been waiting for me. Inside, the air was colder, heavier. The trapdoor stood open. A faint glow leaked from below. I descended slowly, every step echoing. The man stood in the basement, arms folded, the light of a lantern casting sharp shadows across his scarred face. The metal box sat on the workbench between us. "You came," he said simply. "I want answers," I managed, my voice trembling. He nodded. "Then listen. Your grandfather wasn't the man you thought he was. Charles Whitaker wasn't just some retired mechanic. He was part of something bigger, a group that took people, studied them, made them disappear." My throat tightened. "You're lying." The man gestured to the filing cabinets. "You've seen the records. You think those were just notes? No, those were trophies. Documentation of every life that was taken." I shook my head violently. "No," he wrote, "keep her safe on my mother's photo." He carved my initials on the trapdoor. He wanted me to find this. The man's eyes darkened. "Exactly. Because he wanted you to continue his work." My breath caught.
"What?"
"He raised you for it. He groomed you. That box," the man tapped the heavy metal lid, "was meant to be yours. The tools inside, the files, the names, your inheritance. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. You're insane. I'm nothing like him. The man's scarred lips curled. Then open the box and prove it. My hands trembled as I reached for the lock. My mind screamed not to, but my body moved anyway, as if compelled. I slid a key, the man tossed me into the lock. With a click, the lid lifted. Inside there were weapons, knives, syringes, ropes, all meticulously organized. And beneath them, another photograph of me. Older, current, taken within the last year. My vision blurred. My grandfather had planned this, even long after his death. He had left me this garage, this basement, this legacy. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I'm not him. I won't be him. The man stepped closer, voice low and sharp. It's not about choice. It's in your blood. That's why he left it all to you. That's why he kept you alive when others vanished. Because you're his heir. Rage and terror surged together inside me. I slammed the box shut and hurled it off the table. The weapons clattered across the concrete floor. I'll never be like him. I shouted, the man's face twisted with anger. For the first time, his calm demeanor cracked. Then you'll be there next, file. He lunged, but adrenaline drove me. I grabbed the crowbar from the workbench and swung with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with a sickening thud. He collapsed, unconscious. Chest heaving, I stared at him on the floor. Then at the box, the cabinets, the endless records of lives stolen. I had two choices: walk away and pretend none of this was mine, or burn it all, destroying every trace of the nightmare my grandfather built. I chose fire. By dawn, Alder Street was filled with smoke. The garage, the basement, the files, the box, all reduced to ashes. Sirens wailed in the distance, but I was already gone. Watching from the hillside as the flames devoured the past, my grandfather's secrets would never haunt anyone again. But as the smoke curled into the sky, one thought gnawed at me. If he had planned all this for me, then how many others had he prepared before me? And were they still out there?